My sister chose her own wedding as the stage to destroy me. She did not lower her voice. And she did not hesitate. In front of 200 guests, she pointed at me and laughed, telling everyone that I was nothing but a washed-up house cleaner who could not be trusted to think for herself. My mother stood beside her, smiling, and added that I had always been the slow one in the family. A few people laughed along. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Nobody told them to stop. I stood there in a plain navy dress, my hands folded in front of me, occupying the exact space my family had decided I belonged in the edge of the room. Easy to overlook and easier to mock. The band kept playing. The champagne kept flowing. The reception moved forward as if nothing had happened at all. That was the part that hurt the most, not the words themselves, but how ordinary the cruelty felt to everyone watching. What happened next did not begin with me speaking. It began when someone else finally looked my way. My name is Marguerite Coleman, though everyone who has ever loved me calls me Rhett. I grew up in a modest house outside Richmond, Virginia, the younger of 2 daughters. My sister, Vivienne, was the one our parents built their pride around. She had the easy charm, the effortless confidence, the gift for making every room feel like it belonged to her. I had none of that. Or, so I was told so many times that I eventually believed it myself. I found a quiet corner near the back of the reception hall, where the light was dim and the noise of conversation was muffled by distance. A server passed with a tray of champagne, and I took a glass simply to have something to hold. The bubbles rose and disappeared. Unbeyond, the same way my words had disappeared over the years every time I tried to speak up and was talked over instead. Around me, guests traded compliments about the venue, the flowers, the size of the guest list. I caught pieces of conversation about Vivienne's new husband, Grant, and the investment firm he had just launched with backing from some very serious people. Nobody asked me a single question. Nobody looked at me long enough to wonder who I was. That was by design. The invitation had arrived at my apartment 3 months earlier. No note. No phone call. No offer to help with travel. Just a formal card with silver lettering and a date circled on my calendar like a court summons. My mother called 2 days later. Her voice carried the clipped, efficient tone she reserved only for me. She said it would look strange if I did not attend. She said people would ask questions. She told me to come, stay quiet, and not make things difficult for Vivienne on her special day. What do you mean by difficult? I asked. You know exactly what I mean, she said, and the call ended in under 4 minutes. Vivienne called once, a week before the wedding. She did not ask how I was doing. She told me there would be important people at the reception, investors, partners, people who mattered. She said the wedding was as much about business as it was about love. Then she added that I should dress simply. Nothing that would draw attention. Nothing that would make anyone ask what I did for a living. I understand, I told her. Good, she said, and hung up. I had been working as a residential and estate cleaner for 6 years. Not the version my family pictured when they used the word like an insult, not scrubbing gas station bathrooms or mopping fast food floors. I ran my own small company, licensed and insured, with a client list that included some of the wealthiest homes in the region. I had built it from nothing, one referral at a time. I paid my own rent. I carried my own health insurance, and slept well at night knowing every dollar I earned was mine. None of that mattered to my family. To them, I was still the daughter who had dropped out of college after 2 years. The cautionary tale Vivienne could point to whenever she wanted to feel better about her own choices. I watched her now, standing at the center of the room beside her new husband, glowing in a dress that probably cost more than I made in 4 months. Her smile never wavered, not even when her eyes caught mine across the room and she quickly looked away. The ceremony had been elegant and brief, full of promises about partnership and building a life together. I sat in the back row, far from the family section, and watched my mother beam at Vivienne with a pride she had never once aimed at me. After the ceremony, The guests drifted into the reception hall for cocktails. And the room arranged itself, the way rooms like that always do. The important people gathered at the center. The less important ones orbiting nearby, hoping for a moment of attention. And people like me pushed to the edges, where we made ourselves small. That was when Vivian gave her toast. She had been drinking, and the champagne had loosened her tongue. She spoke about her journey, her ambition, the values our parents had instilled in her: hard work, discipline, making the right choices. Then she turned, found me in the crowd, and pointed. She said my name like a punchline. She said I was proof of what happened when someone refused to take life seriously. She called me the family's dreamer, the one who could not be trusted with anything requiring real thought. She called me an illiterate maid and laughed. And a ripple of uncomfortable laughter followed her around the room. My mother rose beside her, resting a hand on Vivian's shoulder, and added her own commentary. She called me the slow one, the one they had always worried about, the one who never figured out how to succeed. She said it lightly, the way someone shares a mildly embarrassing anecdote. Not cruel exactly, just honest. Just stating facts everyone already knew. I stood there holding my champagne glass and felt the room shrink around me. I felt the glances that flickered toward me and darted away just as fast. I felt the silence of everyone who heard what was said and chose to say nothing at all. And then I felt something different. A different kind of attention entirely. I looked up and saw a man standing near the front of the room. He was older, silver-haired, with a kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without being asked. He was not laughing. He was not looking away. He was watching me. His expression unreadable. His eyes steady. I did not know his name yet. I did not know why he was looking at me the way he was. But I recognized the quality of his attention. It did not feel like judgment. It felt like a question. The band started again. The toasts continued. Vivienne moved on to her next handshake, her next performance. But the man kept watching me. And for the first time all evening, I did not look away. I noticed the shift in the room before I understood the cause of it. Conversations grew quieter. Guests straightened their posture. The casual energy of the reception turned watchful. Then I saw him moving through the crowd, and the guests parted for him the way water parts around a stone. His name moved through the room in whispers: Weston Callahan. Weston Callahan. I knew the name. Anyone who followed business news knew it. Weston Callahan had built an international investment firm from almost nothing, with holdings in energy, logistics, and infrastructure projects across 3 continents. He spoke 4 languages fluently and had negotiated deals that made headlines in 6 countries. When Weston Callahan walked into a room, the room paid attention. Grant noticed him first. I watched my new brother-in-law's expression shift from confident host to eager supplicant in the space of a breath. He crossed the room with a smile just slightly too wide and a handshake that lasted a beat too long. My mother followed close behind, introducing herself, mentioning the family's roots in the community, hinting at values that might appeal to a man like Weston. Weston listened with the patience of someone who had heard this approach 1,000 times before. His attention seemed to float above the conversation, landing briefly on details before moving on. Then Grant made a mistake. Trying to build rapport. He gestured across the room toward me and laughed. "That's my sister-in-law over there," he said. "The cleaner." Proof that not everyone in this family got the same drive. Weston did not laugh. He looked at Grant for a long moment, then turned his gaze toward me, not with pity, not with curiosity, just attention. Focused, total attention. As if he were seeing straight through the story my family had built, and noticing that it did not fit the person standing in front of him. He excused himself from the conversation and walked toward my table. "May I sit?" he asked. I nodded, unable to trust my voice just yet. He sat across from me and folded his hands. "I apologize for the directness," he said, "but I need to ask you something." Then he spoke a full sentence in French, asking whether I understood him. I looked at him for a long moment, and I answered him in French. His expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. He asked a second question, more complex this time, using vocabulary that would trip up anyone who had only studied the language casually. I answered that one too. He asked a third question, this time about a specific trade concept, the kind of thing only someone with real expertise would recognize. I answered that one completely and correctly. How long have you been fluent? He asked quietly. Almost 12 years. I said. He nodded slowly, as though confirming something he had already suspected. And you clean houses for a living? I looked at him directly, and for the first time all evening, I did not feel the need to explain or defend myself. Yes, I said. I do. What my family had never bothered to remember because it did not fit the story they preferred was that before I started my cleaning company, I had spent 4 years working as a trade and cultural liaison for a mid-sized consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. I had studied French and business protocol in Lyon on a scholarship I earned entirely on my own. I had helped negotiate contracts worth tens of millions of dollars for clients doing business across Western Europe and North Africa. When the firm was acquired and my department was eliminated, my family called it a failure. When I explained I still had the skills, they called it a phase. Eventually, I stopped explaining anything at all. Weston turned to his associate, a younger man named Preston who had been standing quietly nearby, and said something in French that I understood perfectly. I think, he said, we may have found exactly what we've been looking for. The room noticed. Guests near our table went quiet, glancing over with open curiosity. Grant noticed too, and crossed the room quickly, my mother trailing behind him. Weston, Grant said, his voice a shade too bright. I see you've met my sister-in-law. We've been having an interesting conversation, Weston said, without looking at him. I hope she hasn't bored you with stories, Grant said, glancing at me. Rhett doesn't always know when people are just being polite. The temperature at the table seemed to drop several degrees. On the contrary, Weston said, your sister-in-law has been remarkably informative. My mother stepped forward, resting a hand on Grant's arm. Weston, I hope there hasn't been some misunderstanding. Rhett doesn't always express herself clearly. If she said anything confusing, Weston held up a hand, and my mother stopped mid-sentence. There's no misunderstanding, he said. In fact, I think things are becoming quite clear. He turned to me and asked a technical question in French, this one about a specific negotiation protocol. The kind of detail only genuine expertise could answer. I answered in full, explaining the cultural context, offering a framework that would satisfy both sides of a stalled negotiation, and referencing a similar case I had helped resolve years earlier. The silence that followed was unlike any silence from earlier that night. It was not the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of an entire story being rewritten in real time. Your sister-in-law, Weston said to Grant, speaks fluent French, and she has direct experience in exactly the kind of cross-border negotiation my firm has been struggling with for months. Grant blinked. That's not possible. Rhett doesn't speak French. She cleans houses. Those two facts, Weston said evenly, are not mutually exclusive. He stood, reached into his jacket, and placed a business card on the table in front of me. Call my office tomorrow, he said. We have a project that needs someone with your exact combination of skills. If you're interested. I picked up the card. I'm interested, I said. I thought you might be, he replied, and walked away with Preston close behind, the crowd parting for them instinctively. Grant and my mother stood frozen at my table, their faces caught somewhere between shock and the first uncomfortable stirrings of understanding. You speak French, Grant finally said. Since when? I looked at him evenly. Since before you started telling everyone I was illiterate, I said. Then I stood, tucked the business card into my purse, and walked away without looking back. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room with a strange, unfamiliar lightness, the weight I had carried for years, my family's disappointment. Their certainty about who I was had not disappeared completely, but it had loosened just enough for me to breathe. At 10 o'clock. I called the number on the card. A polite voice answered, confirmed my name, and scheduled a meeting for that afternoon at Weston's downtown office. I spent the hours before the meeting reviewing everything I could find about his current projects, a major logistics and infrastructure partnership his firm was finalizing with government and private partners across Western Europe, reportedly worth several $billion. It was exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes negotiation that required the skills I had spent years developing and even more years hiding. At the meeting, Weston did not waste time. I did some research last night, he said. Your background is more interesting than your family led me to believe. He listed my old firm, my years there, my reputation among former colleagues who, it turned out, still spoke highly of me. Why did you leave that work behind? He asked. Without judgment. Only genuine curiosity. Because I needed income. And cleaning was available when nothing else was. I said. I had bills to pay. I couldn't wait around for the perfect opportunity. A practical decision, he said, a necessary one. I corrected. He explained the situation plainly. His European partners were growing uneasy not about the financial terms, but about whether the American team truly understood their values and their way of doing business. He needed someone who could speak to them in their own language, literally and otherwise. Someone who understood that in their world, business was built on trust, earned slowly, not contracts signed quickly. Are you interested? He asked. Yes, I said. I'm interested. 3 weeks later, I stood in a conference room overlooking the rooftops of Lyon, a city I had once studied in as a scholarship student with nothing but a suitcase and a stubborn determination to prove something to myself. The negotiations were delicate. On the second day, the lead partner on the other side, a woman named Elise, asked pointed questions about our long-term commitment, a test, disguised as small talk. I answered in fluent, unhurried French, speaking about trust built over years, not quarters, and about the honor of working with partners whose reputation matched their ambition. Elise studied me for a long moment. You understand, she said, switching to English. You truly understand. I do, I said. And so does Mr. Callahan. That's why he brought me here. By the end of the week, we had a signed agreement in principle. That night, at a small dinner to celebrate, Weston raised his glass. To Margaret Coleman, he said, who has proven, once again, that the most valuable people are often the ones everyone else overlooks. Later, he leaned back and studied me with that same steady gaze from the wedding. I have a confession, he said. The moment I saw you that night, I knew you belonged somewhere else entirely. There was something about you that didn't match the story your sister was telling. He paused. Your family made a mistake. They saw what they expected to see, and never once checked whether it was true. But a story only has power as long as people keep believing it. Once you stop, the whole thing falls apart. I flew home a week later with a signed contract and a new title, Senior Cultural Liaison for Cross-Border Partnerships. The salary was more than double what I had earned in the previous 3 years combined. The news traveled fast. My phone filled with messages, congratulations from old colleagues, interview requests from a regional business journal, and, eventually, messages from my family. Grant texted 3 times, each one more urgent, saying we needed to talk, that there had been some kind of misunderstanding, that our mother was very upset. I did not respond right away. On the 4th day, my mother sent a different kind of message. I need to see you. Please. I agreed to meet at the house I grew up in, the same one where Vivian and I had once shared a bedroom, where our father, before he passed, used to grill on Sunday afternoons. My mother answered the door looking smaller than I remembered. Vivienne was already in the living room. She stood but did not move toward me. I don't understand what happened, my mother said. Once we were seated, not my humiliation, she barely mentioned that, but Weston's interest in me. She wanted to know how I had convinced such an important man that I was qualified for work clearly beyond my abilities. I didn't convince anyone of anything, I said. I have the qualifications. I've always had them. That's not possible, Vivienne said. You dropped out of college. You clean houses? I've been fluent in French for 12 years. I said. I worked in international consulting before the firm downsized. You knew all of this. You just chose to forget it because it didn't fit the story you wanted to tell about me. That's not fair, Vivienne said. You never told us. I told you constantly, I said. Every time I brought it up. You changed the subject. Every time I tried to explain, you made a joke about how impractical I was. You didn't forget. You chose not to know. The room went quiet. My mother finally asked the question underneath all of it. Why didn't you say anything at the wedding when your sister said those things? Why didn't you correct her? Because I spent my whole life trying to correct you both, I said. And it never worked. You decided who I was when I was a child. And nothing I've done since has changed your mind. So I stopped trying. I stood. The difference now is that someone else finally saw me clearly. And you can't pretend anymore. I left without waiting for a response. 6 months later, Vivienne called and asked to meet. Just the two of us. I almost said no. I had built a life that no longer needed her approval to feel complete. But something in her voice made me agree. We met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood. Neither of us lived in neutral ground. She looked thinner than she had at the wedding. Tired in a way that surprised me. I've been thinking about that night, she said. About what I said. What Mom said. I told myself it was just teasing. That everyone knew I didn't mean it. She shook her head. But I did mean it. I believed every word. And I was completely wrong. I listened without interrupting. I think I needed you to be less successful than me, she admitted. So I could feel better about my own choices. That's probably true, I said. I'm sorry, she said. For the wedding. For years of it. Honestly. For never once seeing you as you actually are. I appreciate you saying that. I told her. And I believe you mean it. At least right now. But I don't know if it changes things between us. You spent years building a story about who I was. And you told that story to everyone who would listen. Some of them still believe it. So where does that leave us? She asked. I don't know. I said honestly. Maybe we start over slowly. Maybe we stay polite strangers who share a last name. Maybe something in between. I stood to leave. But I'm not going back to being the person you decided I was. That version of me never existed anywhere except in your imagination. And I'm done pretending otherwise. It has been a little more than a year since that wedding. My life looks almost nothing like it did then, a career that actually reflects who I am. Colleagues who respect my judgment. Financial stability I built with my own hands. And yet, in the ways that matter most, I am the same person I always was. The skills that changed everything were never new. They had been inside me for over a decade. Quietly waiting for someone to notice. What changed was not my ability. What changed was who finally paid attention. My mother and I speak occasionally now. Carefully. Like two people rebuilding a bridge, one board at a time. Vivienne and I have dinner every few months. The conversations are cautious. But they are honest. Which is more than we ever had before. If I could say one thing to anyone living through their own version of that night, it would be this. The story other people tell about you is not the truth. It is only their story. Shaped by their own limitations and their own need to feel superior. Your worth does not depend on whether anyone notices it. It grows quietly. Every time you keep developing your skills and becoming more fully yourself. Whether or not an audience is watching, the best response to being underestimated is not anger. It is simply becoming impossible to overlook. I still remember the way Weston Callahan looked at me that night, not with pity. Not with curiosity. Just attention. Real attention. The kind that sees past the story someone else has written about you. That recognition changed the direction of my life. but the woman he recognized had been there all along. She had simply been waiting. If you have ever felt invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to know you best, remember this: their blindness says nothing about your worth. It only says something about them. And if you keep growing quietly, in your own time, someone will eventually see exactly what they were missing. When that day comes, you will not need to say a single word.